Hello everyone, this is Nadine McCormick from IUCN's Business and Biodiversity Programme. Welcome to this BioBiz Exchange webinar that we're hosting. It's a third of the series that we have now. The theme this time is on engaging business and nature-based solutions. So really great to see all of you arriving here on time. Thank you so much. Perhaps just a little bit of background in terms of what is PANORAMA, first of all. PANORAMA is a platform where different organizations can come together and reflect and share lessons from their experiences in a way that others can then benefit from and actually take up themselves. And really, IUCN's Business Biodiversity Programme, we joined this collective platform with GIZ, RARE, UNDP, UNEP and others as a way to pull together the knowledge that exists within our network around business engagement. This is a key part of a program that we have called the BioBiz Exchange, where we are aiming to mobilize the knowledge within the conservation community to better engage business. And so we know that one of the entry points that we have is around nature and nature-based solutions. And so today what we wanted to do is kind of share with you some examples of how other organizations within the conservation network have brought nature-based solutions to business, but maybe not necessarily called it that, and what we can as participants learn from that as well. So maybe just to kind of set the, well, actually, so in terms of agenda, we'll be, we'll get an introduction on what is the nature-based standard, nature-based solution standard with our colleague from IUCN, Daisy Hessenberger. And then we've got two case studies to share with you. So the first one is coming from Kenya, the Upper Tana Nairobi Water Fund with David Schaub Jones from the Nature Conservancy. And then secondly, we have a second case study from how shrimp farmers are saving thousands of miles of mangrove coastline in Vietnam. That's with IUCN's Jake Brunner. Then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A at the end, and then just some final remarks and to let you know what we're planning for our next series. At any time, you can use the Q&A box so if you've got any questions at any stage, feel free to click on the right-hand side for Q&A, and we'll see those questions, and so we'll be able to deal with them at the end. So, but anytime you have a question, just throw it in there so you don't lose your train of thought. Otherwise, I think it'd be good just to kind of know who's actually on the call today. So we've got a couple of poll questions to share with you, just to make sure that you're paying attention as well. So the first question is, so hopefully you can see this poll now. The first question is, from what organization are you with? So we can also tailor our input accordingly. So I can see that, yeah, well, one of you has voted in already. That's great. So you've got a few choices here. Are you from civil society or non-governmental organizations? Are you more government, academia, business even? Or would you class yourself as another organization? This just helps us to kind of collect to know who's on the call today. So we see about 2/3 of you have voted. So yeah, 3/4 now. So I'll leave it open a few more minutes. And then, okay, there's a few of you still haven't voted yet. Here's your last chance. I'll close it in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, super. So we'll close that now and share. So hopefully you'll see. So yeah, we have a bit of a mixture in terms of yeah, civil society organizations, NGOs, academia, and other. I'm curious what others are. So if you could just use the Q&A box just to let us know who are you other folk. So no government and no business this time. And actually, really, I think the BioBiz Exchange is really targeted towards civil society organizations and our commission members that we have within IUCN. So it's great that you're on the call today. Thank you. And here's just one more question then, so we can Daisy can tailor her presentation accordingly. So the next question would be, how familiar are you with the concept of nature-based solutions? So are you not familiar at all? And that's absolutely fine. Are you a little familiar, quite familiar, or really very familiar? And then so we can also tailor the session accordingly. So again, I see about 2/3 of you have voted already. We'll leave it open a little bit longer. Let's say 5 more seconds. 4, last chance to vote. 3, 2, 1. Okay, close. All right, so then let's just share with you some of the results of that. So nobody's not familiar at all, which is already great news, Daisy. Okay. It's not that somebody's gone, what? I guess, yeah, if you said yes to come on this webinar, you already know a little bit about what nature-based solutions are. So actually a very even mix. So some a little familiar, some quite familiar, and some very familiar as well. So I'm afraid you're gonna have to do a little bit of everything. Yeah, super. Okay, great. Okay, so without further ado then, I'll pass over to Daisy, who'll give us an overview presentation on nature-based solutions.
Okay, great. So,
I can make that go away. Yeah.
So hi everyone. While Nadine's just moving things around, allow me to introduce myself. I'm Daisy Hessenberger. I've been working with on nature-based solutions at IUCN for over a year now, and specifically on the global standard for nature-based solutions. It's getting to know a lot of different people in the big building and a lot of different stakeholders for that. So when we start talking about nature-based solutions, we always start by looking at what the challenges we're trying to answer. And as you all are aware of, we're facing some very complex challenges in our world today, which range from climate change, food security, water security, human health, economic and social development, and disaster risk reduction. And these are some complex intersectional issues. And luckily I have a background in complexity, so I have a PhD studying evolutionary complexity, which helps a little bit when I'm looking at these very complex issues. And one of the solutions to these very complex challenges we are facing is, there we go, are nature-based solutions. So they're a sort of additional pillar to the approaches we're taking to these challenges at the moment. And I just want to take this opportunity to remind people of the definition for nature-based solutions from IUCN. So these are actions to protect, manage, and restore natural or modified ecosystems which address societal challenges effectively and adaptively, providing both human well-being and biodiversity benefits. So as you can see from the graphic on the right, it's really concentrating on more societal challenges, like the ones I just suggested, and through sort of even conventional conservation efforts, producing both benefits for the natural world at ecosystem level, at a species level, while also providing human well-being. So some of you might be saying, well, that doesn't seem new to me. And that's because you're right. For example, Switzerland has been doing nature-based solutions for years, working on reducing the risk of landslides above their roads. They just haven't called it nature-based solutions. So we're trying to gather the momentum around this term and really push it as an additional solution to some of these challenges. So I talked about those complex societal challenges, and as you're familiar with nature-based solutions, I won't run through this example. So when we're facing these complex challenges, we also have complex solutions. So in the first slide, I had a fact about flooding, and mangroves can, for example, reduce annual flooding for more than 18 million people globally. Similarly, when you're talking about social and economic development, the greening of cities can tackle quite a few different challenges in one go, from human health to do with temperature and air quality, to also economic and social development, driving up retail value in various areas. Great. So hopefully, since we're all familiar with nature-based solutions, that was a nice little recap. And so why are we bothering to make a nature-based solution standard? And my sort of very quick answer is we want to make nature-based solutions user-friendly for the people who are experts in it, for people who've never heard of the term, and how to bring those two groups together. And we went ahead on a slightly unique approach to standards, which was crowdsourcing them. So we started with a skeleton, and we really wanted to increase ownership in the term of nature-based solutions and try and bring everyone along with us. So to give you an idea of what we started with, we wanted a nature-based solution standard that could really enforce the quality, or not enforce, sorry, but promote the quality nature-based solutions that we want to see, the effective solutions to these challenges. But it's not just about quality. The standard's also there to safeguard nature from exploitation. Sorry. It's there to engage new stakeholder groups that we haven't seen before. It's building a common language and understanding, increasing the demand for nature-based solutions from the people who have funding, hopefully, and incentivizing long-term positive sustainable change. So far, it's been a great journey for me to be in this consultation from the very beginning, where we built a standard around the principles of nature-based solutions that our Commission on Ecosystem Management put together. And I've been able to speak to a lot of different stakeholder groups, from engineering consultancies to private sector, the Natural Capital Coalition, to also NGOs and the more traditional conservation actors. So it's been a really steep learning process, and we've learned a lot of lessons on the way. So I've really seen the added value of this actually very standardized approach to doing standards. So ICL requirements for the standard on standards. For anyone who knows the inception process that is finding out about standards, you have to have 2 rounds of external consultation. And so we'll be starting our second one soon. And throughout this consultation process, we've really seen the benefits of engaging the people who are already interested in nature-based solutions. So just by having this standard as a possibility, we've talked to new stakeholders, people who maybe even haven't heard the term of nature-based solutions, but usually it's people who have had some kind of contact to do with the environment. They're already interested in this, and they're the ones who are really demanding the nature-based solution. And I would even go so far to say that the people who are putting the most pressure on us to get these standards out are actually a lot of our private sector partners. And so we've done stakeholder mapping, we're targeting specific groups. So just the process alone of creating a standard has created momentum around nature-based solutions. And so, this webinar is also, or these series are about, how do you talk to business about these? So I wanted to give us a 3 bullet point what we've learned. The first is to really know who you're talking to and what their values are. Because if you go in with, your own values of, well, actually the most important thing here is this specific species in this ecosystem, or, expanding the ecosystem area instead of maintaining it, you might find a gap in talking to that stakeholder. So are they private sector? Are they a large NGO? Are they startups, which need a slightly different conversation? And for example, when we go to very large organizations, knowing a little bit about their project management and how they do that has helped us in conversations about the standard. And the second one, this is very important, is starting with their challenge. So you'll note at the beginning of this presentation, I started with the societal challenges. What is your problem? If I go to investors into real estate, they're going to be thinking about resilience into sustainable infrastructure. How can we cut costs on maintaining the infrastructure we have or that we're about to build? And so start the conversation with what they are really worried about and what they need, and then bring in your term of, well, actually I'm working on this and this is how it could contribute and provide additional benefits. And that's key. So whenever I talk about nature-based solutions and the standard, I mention what are emerging as the unique selling points. So the things that stakeholders have been really interested in so far are, how complementary can this be with current conventional solutions or a solution we already have up and running? And in the image at the beginning, which I had to skip over, you might have to have some kind of wall to prevent flooding or to lower the risk of flood damage. That doesn't mean you can't also restore your wetland or your mangrove ecosystem there. So a unique selling point would be, this can be merged with other solutions. And in fact, what we want is the most effective solution to that challenge. And if that is a combined solution, that is what goes ahead within the nature-based solutions pillar of action. And the other unique selling point would also be the, the other unique selling point of the MBS is the fact that it gives additional benefits. And so that's what we learned during our consultation. We had a criterion about trade-offs, and that seems a bit more enforcing. Really, we should be promoting the fact that nature-based solutions can have additional benefits across different solutions. So by tackling a challenge to do with food security, you might be answering also a challenge to do with water security. And you may also be getting some economic benefits outside of that as well. So the additional benefits are a unique selling point of nature-based solutions. And so quickly, what does a global standard mean for you or your business if you are in the business sector? A very quick graphic on how you would actually use the standard in its very purest form, which is at the moment we have 9 criteria broadly following these 9 themes, the most exciting of which the new 9th criteria on economics and finance. And you would do your own self-assessment. At the current stage, there won't be a certification process. That might be something we look into or that we set up in the future. But it's a self-assessment taking probably in an Excel sheet. And from that, you will, instead of getting a no, yes, this is and isn't an MBS, it'll be more of a traffic light system. This is 80% matching with the IUCN global standard on nature-based solutions, which you can communicate it to funders, you can pitch towards a company, and also a little bit of a gap analysis. So if you have a proposal, you get this circumplex chart, where are weaknesses in this proposal? Have we really, maybe we're missing a bit of stakeholder engagement, or we haven't really thought about the policy landscape. So 80% on the standard doesn't necessarily mean, actually that can be a very good result and something you can keep working towards. But how can you use the standard now? Sorry, I didn't realize that was there. So if you want to, how you can use the added value of just the development process is you can take part in our public consultation in July. It'll be a very quick survey. And you can use this also to engage new stakeholders. If you know there's someone who you think, actually, IUCN really needs your feedback on the standard, or you've got a really unique point, or you're just, oh, I need something to get the conversation started. Let's talk about a standard and what that would mean for you. You can also, if you're a little bit ahead of the curve, set up a pilot, which we can provide technical support for on past, current, or future interventions. The pilots can be quite varied, so we're looking for some even borderline nature-based solutions, as I call them. And of course, you can always email us with questions and feedback. So that's it from me. I think I've probably run to time there.
Actually, you're ahead of the time, so that gives us a chance just to check if there's any clarification questions or comments just at this stage before we hand over to David with the first case study. I'll just give you a couple of minutes, see if there's any. I haven't seen any come in the Q&A box yet. So remember to use that Q&A chat box just to kind of, share questions as they come up, so you don't need to wait at the end. So far, no questions, which means you did a great job explaining everything. So thank you, Daisy. So with that, I'm gonna, hang on a minute. There's a question that might have come in. Let's have a quick look here now. Okay, so we're actually just one of our participants, Michael Cunningham. So it seems like you're doing a lot of nature-based solution stuff already, thinking of a pilot around carbon offsetting, and you're going to email us. Great, actually there'll be certainly some context as well at the end of the webinar. So and maybe Michael, you could kind of come on and talk about that a little bit later for the discussion later. Super, but actually, great. So no questions, but an offer of a pilot maybe. So super, all right. So I'll just hand over then now to David. So David, hopefully you can mute yourself. Super, I can hear you loud and clear. So David, we're really happy to have David Schaub Jones with us from the Nature Conservancy. So he's our Water Funds Program Manager, based out of South Africa normally, but currently calling in from Brussels. So David, I really look forward to hearing more about this case study that's coming from the Upper Tana Nairobi Water Fund. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you for inviting me to present. So hello everyone. As it says here on the slide, I'm going to talk about one particular case study, which is in Kenya, but I should situate that first within the broader scope of water funds, which is what this case study is, and don't worry, I'll get to explaining that. So in order to explain it, I always sort of revert to the simple who, why, what, when, how, and I had some lovely slides to demonstrate this to you, but they were too exciting for our hosts here on the webinar. So there will be no surprises. You can see everything I'm going to say on this slide in front of you, but bear with me while I give you some of the background to that. So I think the first thing is to say, where are we talking about? Well, specifically, this case study is in Nairobi in Kenya, and then upstream of Nairobi, which is the capital. But it's about a water fund, and a water fund is a concept which originates in Latin America and spread throughout Latin America and North America before moving to Kenya about 5-6 years ago, when this Upper Tana Nairobi Water Fund became the first water fund in Africa. There's now a second one in Cape Town in South Africa, where I'm based, and others being discussed in West Africa, in Morocco, and other countries also in Asia. But the Upper Tana River basin is where the water fund I'll talk about today is. And for those of you unfamiliar with water basins, that's basically all of the land on which collects the water, which flows into the streams, which flows into the rivers, which then feed the water supply of Nairobi, which is home to roughly 4 million people. So there's 5 million people living in the watershed, that's the River Tana and the Upper Tana, and that's where this case study takes place. Now, that water is also used to power hydropower facilities, and that provides 95% of the electricity supply to Nairobi, and actually 65% of the country's hydropower. So effectively, what we're talking about here is an area where the water is being used both for water supply and for energy, and is feeding the capital city of the country, but also 2/3 of the power for the whole country. Now, what's the problem? That's the why. So upstream of Nairobi, there's a lot of small-scale farms in what is quite hilly territory, and it's this typical red African soil and lots of small-scale farms. And traditional farming practices are leading to a lot of, when it rains heavily, a lot of the soil flooding into the river, and then that washes downstream, and it starts to cause problems for the hydropower facilities, and it causes challenges for Nairobi water in treating the water so people can drink it. So that's the problem, but as in all these things, and we're talking about business today, the question to ask is, okay, well, who's going to pay to resolve that? If you like, what is the business case? And the business case here is that practice, or the lack of good practice from the traditional way of farming, as these terraces go higher and higher up the hills and the farming is more and more dense, the soil washes down, and it's causing $600,000 of revenue loss for the power generating company, because it's filtering up the dams and it's causing problems with the power generation. It's also contributing $250,000 to additional treatment costs and other problems for Nairobi city water, because again, that water is basically muddier than it could be if you're able to stop that soil washing in upstream. And so that's effectively where the water fund comes in. And as I said, this is the first water fund in Africa, but a water fund is something that the Nature Conservancy has been doing for almost 20 years and is now working to get partners in many places around the world to take up the model with or without the help of the Nature Conservancy and put it in place. And there's 4 key elements to a water fund. Effectively, you put in place, as the name suggests, a financial mechanism, but also a governance mechanism that pulls together different stakeholders. And those stakeholders come from the public sector, from the private sector, including business, and from civil society. And it pulls them together around a common goal, which is around water security, but also around delivering conservation benefits, biodiversity, etc. And that's very much factored in, because all of the water funds in the world, and there's give or take 40 now, are using nature-based solutions and sustainable watershed management in order to deliver benefits downstream. So at its heart, a water fund is about getting people downstream who get the benefits of some improved practice or better conservation upstream, which protects the water resource and delivers those benefits, and finding a way to package that, the stakeholders together, so that you can take and you can generate money from the benefits and have that invested upstream. And so let's look now at how exactly that works for Nairobi. So in Nairobi, the problem, as I say, is the farmers upstream. In Cape Town, it's a different story. In Cape Town, the problem is non-native vegetation using up the water. In Ecuador, it's overgrazing of the grasslands upstream in the highlands above the city that cause the problem. But in Kenya, the specific issue is with the farmers. And so there's more than 20,000 farmers who've been signed up by the Water Fund in order to improve best practice and to apply soil conservation and water saving methods. And so that's rainwater harvesting in the wet season to catch the water, and then small scale storage facilities to store the water so that they can use that to prolong the growing season, but also use less water at the key times on their farms so that there's less flooding into the river. And so effectively here we're talking about engaging a lot of farmers in order to benefit the downstream. And that's where the business element comes in. And so we're talking about business involvement in nature-based solutions. What types of businesses are we talking about? Well, the first is KenGen, which is the hydropower. That's the national utility company, and they're generating the power for Kenya. And as we said, there are almost $600,000 of benefits to be gained in reducing the soil inflow into the rivers. There's Nairobi Water, but there's also other companies such as Frigoken, which works with a lot of these small-scale farmers in order to take their produce and then export it overseas. There's Pentair, which sells equipment that's used in the food and beverage industry. There's East African Breweries, which brews beer. And these, if you like, there's the Coca-Cola Foundation. These are representative of the sort of businesses that in the 40 water funds around the world come together and see a benefit in both being part of the steering group, but also investing money, which then goes upstream to protect the resource and improve the water security. So how exactly does this work? So as I said before, a water fund basically finds people downstream who are going to benefit. It gets them to join a representative body, which is the Water Fund Governance Board. And then that governance board selects key projects, but very much based on what makes sense from a scientific basis, what makes sense to invest in order to generate specific benefits downstream. So what you see is the Water Fund Governance Board, then having selected those projects, works with implementers upstream, in this case the Nature Conservancy, but also others, to work with farmers to teach them better ways to farm, which reduces the soil flowing into the rivers, which generates those benefits downstream. And it's very key for all water funds to be able to monitor those project impacts, because these are sort of 30 to 40-year arrangements. And of course, the people putting in the money want to see that the actual benefits are generated. So in essence, the water fund is a story of collaboration. It's a story of different actors from public, private, civil society coming together in order to have that common work plan and a reliable source of funding committed over the long term in order to pay for these things. Now in Nairobi, what are we actually talking about in terms of activities undertaken? Well, they've planted 2 million trees now in the watershed, because obviously trees and the roots of trees help stop soil erosion. There's 120,000 acres that are under sustainable management. A lot of these farmers have joined other organizations, such as ones that support better coffee growing and fair trade, or ones that deal with small-scale farmers and with conservation. And as a result of the activities that have been taken upstream, what we see is 27 million more liters of water flowing into Nairobi each day. So we have improved water quantity, but we've also got improved water quality, because 50% of a reduction in the sediment is happening in those rivers, which is leading to the sort of benefits I ascribe to the power producers and to Nairobi water. So effectively, that's how a water fund works. You identify a problem, you very much look at how that problem could be resolved and how to generate the financial flows in order to pay for the improvements, and then how you can work with the different stakeholders to put in place a mechanism which can last over time in order to generate those. So the Nature Conservancy about 4 years ago did a study of about 4,000 cities and estimated that 1 in 6 of those cities, if they adopted similar means, could generate the benefits just in terms of reduced water pollution and reduced treatment costs at water plants. So in essence, those are water funds. What I do, we'll open to questions now, but if you're interested more in Nairobi 2020, in April of next year, there's the first Africa Water Security Congress, and hopefully I can post a link into the chat box where you can all find out more news about that. So I hope that was clear, and with that, back to the hosts.
Super, thank you, David. Very clear and yeah, very, very interesting. I've got different heads around the table kind of nodding and going, yeah, no, that's really fantastic. And certainly the monitoring you have in place to be able to come out with some of those indicators in terms of trees and water flow, quality, quantity is just, it's really impressive. And as you say, I mean, like it's been going, what, 20 years now? I've heard a lot about the water fund. So it was actually great to hear from in person, well, almost, more about it. And I really feel like, yeah, with PANORAMA Solutions, where it enables you to kind of get this take up of the model as well. So we'll see how we can get this model actually on PANORAMA Solutions as well. I know we've already got one from Colombia on there already, but I really, really appreciate it. So just to kind of urge the callers in just to kind of share your questions now. We're going to go to Jake now, our colleague in IUCN Asia office. So we'll go for questions afterwards. So if you've got questions, make sure you type them in the chat box so then you don't lose them. We're going to go into our next case study and then we'll open up for questions. So Jake, if you can unmute yourself. Jake. So Jake is calling in from Vietnam, and I know the internet's been a little bit wobbly, so hopefully the internet stands out. Jake, you're still muted. Sorry, it's the webinar game. If you're playing bingo now, if you see it, look it up.
Okay, I'm on now.
Hi, Jake. Thank you. So yeah, Jake
I think you muted me.
Sorry, I muted you. Oh, it's my fault. Okay, sorry. Okay, I apologize. Sorry. So yeah, Jake Brunner, actually, we're really grateful for him for stepping in. It's actually a really great example that's come from one of our regional colleagues, Anne Moe, wrote it up with one of our partners, Andrew White. They weren't able actually to join the webinar today, so Jake has wonderfully kind of stepped in as the head of our IUCN Indo-Burma Group office. I mean, of course, you know this case study really well as well, Jake, but yeah, looking forward to hearing your presentation on how shrimp farmers are saving thousands of miles of mangroves. Thank you, Jake.
Okay, having destroyed a great deal as well, so let me just provide some context. Shrimp farming, Vietnam is one of the largest shrimp producers and exporters in the world. I think maybe second after Thailand, Eastern Asia, and shrimp farming took off sort of in the late 80s, early 90s, and was responsible for massive mangrove loss, particularly in the Mekong Delta, where conditions for shrimp farming are ideal. And the spread of shrimp farming, particularly intensive shrimp farming, so farming that's not connected to any kind of tidal flows or natural water exchange, has been very profitable, and you can see the wealth. It's also come with major risks, notably disease. So every few years there's been sort of catastrophic crop failure. Some of the big businesses have sort of ridden it out, but you know, tens of thousands of smallholders that borrowed money to grow shrimp, to farm shrimp, went bankrupt. So it's a major environmental issue and a social issue. The other issue is that countries, for various reasons, have imposed increasingly strict rules on chemical residues in shrimp. In the US, you know, there's elements of protectionism about it. In Japan, has got extremely strict standards that reflects that sort of national norms. So for these reasons, there's been a major shift in interest towards the farming of organic shrimp or nature shrimp. And what we have worked with partners to do is to scale up a model of what we call integrated mangrove shrimp. And we've done this in the province of Cà Mau, which is the southernmost province in Vietnam, where there is what we call a sort of an integrated mangrove shrimp landscape covering about 45,000 hectares. So this area alone probably covers at least 1/3, maybe 40% of all of mangroves, all of Vietnam's remaining mangroves. So getting it right in this landscape is critical to the future, well, basically the future of mangroves in Vietnam. So we started working there in late 2012, starting off with farmer training, and now 6 years later or so, we now work with about 5,000 farmers, managing on average 15,000 hectares of forest of mangroves. So just the farmers we work with alone represent about 10% of Vietnam's entire mangrove cover. So a fairly significant amount. The model of integrated mangrove shrimp farming is basically it's a natural system where ponds are dug and then opened up to the natural tidal flows, which brings in food, wild shrimp, different kinds, crab, and sea bass in particular. What it is, it's sort of a multi-trophic system with shrimp, crabs, oysters, and sea bass in particular. So it's a very productive, it's a natural but very productive system. And because of the tidal flows, there's good water circulation, so disease risk goes right down. And because it's a natural system, then there are no problem with sort of non-tariff barriers for exports, particularly the US and Japan. So this is a sector that's grown, and we've worked with a major shrimp company called Ningfu, which exports anywhere between $500 million and $1 billion a year of shrimp, largely to the US, but increasingly to Japan. And they produce, they've got farms all across southern Vietnam, intensive, hyper-intensive, extensive, and then this integrated mango shrimp, which, unlike the sort of factory farming, produces very large shrimp. We classify them by the number of units per kilogram. So in a sort of factory shrimp farm, you may produce somewhere between 40 and 60 pieces per kilogram. We produce between 15 and 20. So they're huge, sort of like small lobsters, and absolutely delicious. There is a very clear kind of payments for environmental services, whereas the sort of previous example was more sort of upstream, downstream. And I think, in a sense, this is a sort of an international PES where consumers in the US and EU and Japan pay a premium price for shrimp that have been harvested with a substantial number of cover. But by law, these farms need to maintain 50% of their pond area under mangroves, and that provides, if you like, kind of the legal basis for our work, because the certification system requires compliance with local laws. In this case, it requires 50%. So the checking of the mangrove cover, which is done both through paper and regular inspections, is a key part of the program. When we initially started this project, there was a lot of discussion about premium payments. After about 5 years, the issue kind of disappeared. And the reason was because the additional income that a farmer can gain from increasing pond productivity far exceeded whatever relatively small premium payment shrimp was offered by the business. In fact, we've now moved entirely away from a premium payment into a mangrove base. Basically, the farmers get paid by the area of mangroves on their farm. So there's a direct, there is a payment, but it's directly linked to mangrove cover. And what IUCN and SNV have done has really focused more on the farmer training and retraining and retraining. Education levels are pretty low, so one training session is not enough. And to demonstrate how, for example, buying higher quality post-flavi, it may cost a little bit more per unit, but it doubles the productivity. And that's where the real income and livelihood gains exist, not in terms of the payments, but in terms of increased pond productivity and reduce disease risk. Just to end off by saying, there were some elements of sort of some success elements that made that's making this work very well in Canada. One is that the farmers don't have title to the land. They under what are called long-term lease contracts, basically 20-year renewable contracts. And this is important because what you have now is sort of a co-management regime where the government is sort of the landlord and the small farmers are the tenants, but they've got, basically guaranteed tenancies, but they must comply with the mangrove. So there's kind of a balance of both rights and responsibilities that have worked out really well. In other parts of Vietnam, it's all privately owned, and the government has very limited sort of executive authority. And we've seen, not surprisingly, continued loss of mangrove. So this kind of mangrove co-management model seems to be important. Another point that I mentioned was this big investment in training and in farmer group formation. So we group farmers into sort of 30 households of about 30 farmers, 30 families, and they provide a unit of learning, kind of peer-to-peer advice, but also a degree of surveillance. If someone goes and cuts down a whole lot of mangroves, that jeopardizes certification. And so there's strong peer pressure to comply. So I guess my last point is to say that this model has been picked up by the World Bank and other major donors, trying to scale it out, replicate it across the Mekong Delta. I talked about it mostly in terms of livelihoods, but of course the mangroves provide so many other benefits. There's the storm windbreaks, but also mangroves are very good at trapping sediment. And so this is a way actually of expanding the delta, maintaining the mangroves. And the government periodically has, proposes these sort of mega sea dikes, which are massively expensive to build and even more expensive to maintain. And our proposition to the government is, hey, we can actually save you money. You can keep people, you can maintain their current livelihoods, but at basically at no cost. And of course, there's very significant carbon benefits that I won't go into now. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. Really excellent overview. And again, thank you for kind of stepping in and doing that. But it feels like you were pretty much involved in the project too, just the level that you were sharing with us. And maybe now, it's the moment to really kind of pose your questions, if you want to put your comments in, and then we can open it up for discussion. We've got at least 15 minutes for this now. Maybe just as you're thinking about your questions and just to see that, just our reflection, thinking of what Daisy said at the beginning of the call in terms of lessons that they've learned, like go in, know who you're talking to and know what their challenges are. It was really interesting, and actually neither of the presentations, the cases that we just heard, that they went in and said, oh, hello, can you save nature? But really they've gone in and said, you're having a problem with reduced shrimp production. We think we have an idea that can help you, or you're losing revenue because of like sedimentation for your dams, but like it's going in with that challenge, and then nature becomes a solution to the challenge. But that really, the two great examples that really highlighted the lessons there. And maybe just to say that these are two fantastic examples. There are actually many more on the Panorama Solutions website as well. So actually here we just wanted to highlight a few more as well that you can also look at as well. Building with nature, this is an example that's come from the Wetlands International, again looking at coastlines in Indonesia. There's another great example from IUCN in the Nepal region, more a mountain example as well around infrastructure. And then also UNEP has a really interesting example in DRC as well. So actually do please have a look at the Panorama Solutions website. There's more than 500 solutions there online. You can search and enter them in from different ways and different directions. But yeah, keyword search, or search for nature-based solutions, or search for business engagement, and you can find many examples there. So in terms of the questions, I'm not actually seeing any come through at the moment. We're still we're about 15 people on the call, so we're relatively small. If somebody would like to potentially unmute themselves, that's also possible. Oh, actually Daisy's putting her hand up first of all, actually. So yeah, I would like to invite questions. If you would like to actually speak as well, you can also raise your hand on the call. We can come to you as well. But Daisy, in the meantime, yes.
Hi, yeah, I have a question for David, although any lessons learned from Jake as well about sort of the monitoring side of things, because I think that's something that's often left to later, or it's difficult to do monitoring while it's seen as very expensive. And I've always been intrigued by nature-based solutions in water basins, because I think there's a huge potential there, because my understanding is in water basins is often a certain level of monitoring already set up, like checking water quality and seeing how much, for example, energy is being produced. So yeah, David, do you think there's anything that you've learned about nature-based solutions at a sort of water basin level that could be applied to other systems, not just a water fund, but a fund for other systems, lessons about monitoring?
So David, if you can unmute yourself and respond. Yep. Thank you.
Yes, I could try. I wasn't thought. Yeah, no, thank you. So I think, yeah, look, one of the interesting things, as you say, about the water funds is two things. It's the time frame. So we're talking 20 to 30 to 40 years. And then I think also partly for most of them, they're at a certain scale where there's some serious sums of money being discussed. And both the time frame and the scale make that monitoring super important. It means that both you need the monitoring in order to keep the parties interested and engaged and see that they're getting value for their investment. And then you also need it over a long period of time to be able to strip out things like natural variability. So as you say, the water sector, I guess, benefits from the fact that there is water quality monitoring, there's monitoring of water volumes in streams, there's the hydrographic record, and that varies from country to country, but that's something you can build on. I think the challenge we have is obviously, rainfall and seasonality are very variable. And so if you come from the sides and you're just working at a business and, you're not very familiar with hydrology, you might say, okay, well, how do I know that the benefit this year wasn't just because it rained more? Or you're telling me that I didn't get a benefit this year, but that's because there was an unusual drought. So even though you have that monitoring, you still need to really focus on the communication and turn the sort of scientific monitoring into things that stakeholders can understand in order to motivate and keep the buy-in. And whether or not that exists in other sectors, whether you have the existing monitoring platforms or whether you have the challenge of seasonality and variability, I don't know. But just to circle back, it is very important for water funds to generate that credibility through science-based monitoring. And that's at the Nature Conservancy, 400 of the 4,000 staff have PhDs, and they put a lot of emphasis on being science-based. But if you're more interested in monitoring, there's a whole chapter on it at the waterfundstoolbox.org. And that's obviously monitoring for water funds, but I think there's a lot of things that could help with nature-based solutions more broadly.
Super, and there's a really concrete suggestion there as well to look at the reference. And actually just interesting some of the lessons you're sharing there, where we have a broader project around biodiversity indicators for business. We're often approached by companies saying, oh, we want the equivalent of a greenhouse gas emissions target for biodiversity. Can we have an indicator? And we always come back and say, well, what's your question? What do you need to know? Who needs to know? What time frame? What time scale, etc. So yeah, it's interesting. That also resonates from a corporate angle or a water basin angle. So I think there's definitely some cross learnings to be had there. Super, thank you, David. I'm just looking now. So Michael Cunningham from the UK. So actually a couple of points you've raised here now, and actually maybe Michael, we're not a big group actually, so would you like to unmute yourself and to pose your first question, at least anyway, to the group, and see if there's an answer from the group? I've unmuted you, so let's see if that works. If not, I can read it out for you. Okay, it was worth a try. So interrupt me if you do manage to get your microphone to work. It looks like you're agreeing, but in the meantime, you made an interesting point. I mean, you say earlier on you'd mentioned that you're doing some tree planting I guess it's in the UK, I'm not certain, and you're hoping to use individuals within companies, so instead of the business paying out, using individuals. And so are there any data or examples of how individuals in companies have done this, or if not, how can we achieve this? So I don't know if there's any thoughts from others on the call here. So if I understood the question correctly, it's rather than letting like a shrimp company pay, but you're looking for individuals in the shrimp company. So maybe that's more at an individual kind of community level participation. I mean, certainly the drivers are different. I don't know if any of our presenters would like to have a go at that question. Or anybody around the table.
I guess the issue is one of scale, right? I mean,
yes.
Motivated staff, in a company, and we know what businesses they want to maximize staff participation because that's a good result. But to be honest, that's more HR strategy than a strategy, in my experience.
Yeah, exactly, Jake. And I think you're right in terms of getting to scale. Often we see change in companies doesn't happen all at once. And actually, when Daisy and I were preparing for this webinar, we're talking about, if you go to an individual in a company, let's say it's the head of sustainability in a company, and you go in straight away and start talking about nature-based solutions, so you're going to get a blank look. But if that company has already made, commitments around climate or water or nature, then they're much more mature. They're able to kind of take that on board. But philanthropical activities or even individuals who are taking on roles within their own communities, that's definitely an entry point, a starting point. It's more than the level of ambition. And then, yeah, maybe if there's like zero engagement from the company, perhaps starting with an individual is a good way to go. And then, but then you need to support that individual as a change agent in their own company to then get to scale. So it doesn't happen all at once. Maybe you start with an individual. Yeah, it's all about networks really at the end of the day. And one of the Panorama partners, Rare, has a really nice theory of change where they look at the influence of networks and how it's individuals and peers who can actually get that behavior change to happen in addition to the other barriers. So yeah, Daisy, do you want to add to that? Yeah, no, you're nodding. No.
I was nodding in agreement, because I think that's how we haven't targeted individuals for sort of funding the project, but definitely to get the momentum moving inside a company that doesn't usually talk about nature-based solutions. I mean, a lot of businesses will have like an environment department, right? Or sustainability department or team, and often in certain spheres of business they don't feel very empowered in their company. And some individuals have told us, they ask us for help, but also we've asked them, how can we help you? We see that you're on board for nature-based solutions, and we love your vision of how nature-based solutions could be paired with alternative energy or the agricultural component of your business. But how can we help you get more traction inside your larger business? So that's a really good question to ask, and it helps with we've been talking today about knowing your audience, and I really like adding to that. So when you say know your audience, not just know their familiarity with the terms or how comfortable they are with the environment, but knowing their scale and time frame, I think, is really important, because often I think one of the challenges with these kind of solutions is that the time frame that nature acts over is much longer than what certain investors would like to sort of plan an intervention. But knowing that at least you can come in well equipped.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just looking that there's no other questions kind of coming in at the moment except from Michael. So I'm going to keep working with Michael's example. So he couldn't get his microphone to work, unfortunately, but he just followed up and he said, yeah, but what if the company doesn't or can't do anything? So then how do we get them to ask their employees if they want to support my cause? And that's interesting. I mean, Michael, we haven't met, but I think there's really interesting language that you've used there, to support my cause. And what's interesting when you start working and engaging with the companies, it's about understanding what their challenge is, looking at what you're able to offer and meet somewhere in the middle. So if it's about my cause, then definitely philanthropic type approaches, trying to reach out to some of their, their foundations for companies that are really quite low on the, the maturity curve of understanding sustainable issues. But really, I think in terms of the scale that we need to get to, and yeah, at the speed that we need to go, we need to be kind of aiming high. So I think you can still work with individuals. I mean, identify in your network individuals that you might know within a company and start there. But really, we need to kind of get change to happen within companies, I think. And the nature-based solutions we found has been an interesting frame, because it is solutions orientated. Sometimes, in the environmental community, we are criticized for kind of coming with a doom and gloom, but we're saying, no, nature is a solution to some of your challenges. So yeah, I mean, this is all about what the BioBiz exchange is all about. It's about looking at lessons that we can kind of share between us as a conservation community, like sharing intelligence on what it takes to be able to get companies to start that journey and come along the journey with us. So ultimately, changing their whole decision-making processes and ultimately investing differently, let's say upstream, as a great example from Nairobi showed. But yeah, it's a journey, and maybe that's a feature of another webinar in the future, actually. So you ask, is there an online forum for this? Well, actually, we are just about to set up a Facebook group. And I know Facebook is not so trendy at the moment, but actually a lot of our target audience that we're supporting are our IUCN members in Africa at the moment. That's our target with the funding that we have at the moment. And Facebook is still live and kicking there. But yeah, we'll be opening up a Facebook group in the coming weeks, actually. And if you're on this list, I'll kind of take advantage to be able to kind of let you know about that. And that's where we hope to be able to continue some of these discussions. Great, I'm glad to see you're happy about it. Sorry, it seems funny. I'm interacting with your messages here, so thank you for your support. Okay, so maybe there's about 8 minutes left. I just wanted to kind of pause and kind of check, are there others on the call? We've still got quite a number of you on the call who've been kind of quiet at the moment. Some names I recognize there as well. Are there any, maybe not necessarily questions, but comments that you might have that you've react to, something, you know, that you really agree with, that you want to reiterate as a point, or perhaps, yeah, perhaps even contest slightly, and that's absolutely fine because we're still building up the case around nature-based solutions. If you want to unmute yourself, you just simply put your virtual hand up, tag the hand up, raised hand button, and I can unmute you. But I assume our presenters have done such an amazing job that you have no questions at the moment. Yes, Daisy.
I mean, if there's the time, I'll take the opportunities.
Yes, go for it.
Jake's online. Hi, Jake. I was wondering, it sounds like an incredible implementation of mangroves and markets. I was wondering if there was any link to either policy or whether that's what you got that reflected in sort of national targets there.
Yes, I was going to mention that. Yes, so we formally included this essentially this payment system service arrangement in provincial decision, and that was picked up in national legislation, and that was actually quite difficult because the way the government likes to design PES is they get all the money from the business and then they kind of hand it out, sort of almost, you know, sort of welfare payments. There's no monitoring. You know, if you're poor and deserving, you get your payment irrespective of you know, the environmental impact. So there's lots of P, no E. And we wanted to, our system is basically like all straight from the, you know, the consumer in the West, through the business, through the exporter to the farmer. It doesn't go through the government. And they did not like this direct payment scheme. And it took several years actually lobbying to say, look, this is completely genuine. And you know, you can look how strong the conservation incentive is as a direct incentive for mangrove conservation. That's how it's been measured, and that's how they're being rewarded. So eventually we won the argument, but it was we were definitely sort of swimming uphill or against the tide because it didn't fit the government's model, but essentially they control everything. Everything passes through them.
Okay, I think with that, it's 3 minutes to go to the top of the hour. So we started on time. I'd love to finish on time as well, being respectful of your time. So just a quick thank you to all our presenters today and a virtual hand clap. So for Daisy, for David and Jake, really, really appreciate your time putting your thoughts together and sharing with the group today. And thanks to all of you for joining the webinar today. And yeah, really your feedback will be much appreciated on this. This is our third in the series that we've developed. You will receive normally a survey straight after this webinar finishes. It will take you literally 60 seconds just to fill in, give us a quick number, give us some feedback of like, you know, how we can make this even better for next time. And also if you've got questions or ideas or something that we can address on a future webinar, then please do share that as well. In the meantime, yeah, we plan these on a quarterly basis. So our next one, the date is pretty much set. It's the 26th of September at the same time. We'll be doing it with some of the other partners in Panorama Solutions who have themes around agriculture and biodiversity. So that's Rare International and also GIZ. So we'll be exploring agriculture and business solutions and certainly the potential for being quite controversial as well. But really we'll be looking for solutions and, you know, the building blocks of what made those solutions successful to inspire uptake in others as well. So really please join us for that as well. Yeah, so please fill in the survey, and then there's more information we'll be posting on Twitter and our two handles here for IUCN Business and also the Panorama platform, and then also, yeah, this Facebook group that we'll be setting up soon as well, and I'd be gladly to share that information with you. So otherwise, have a good rest of the day wherever you are in the world. Really, really appreciate your participation today, and you'll receive the recording as well in your inboxes very soon as well. So thank you. And the recording will be shared directly as you've recorded, as you signed up for the webinar as well. So thank you again. Speak to you again another time. And if you want to get in touch with us as well directly, don't hesitate to contact me again directly. Okay, thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.